Okay, here's an update on my third-person combat template. First thing you notice here is that I kind of redid the base layout here of the area just because I want a little bit more space, and I'm going to do some AI. So I want to be able to test moving around pillars and verticality and all of that. Plus, I was tired of looking at the old one. So, moving into features, first thing you notice is I had the ability to launch characters. So you can launch them in the air and then hit them around. And what launching actually does is it puts them up at the maximum jump distance of the character, or the player character. So if you were to toggle how high they jump, even when you launch them, they'll still stop at that location. And you try to launch them a second time, they'll still stay right there. Another thing I added is, the two other big things I added was auto locking. Whenever you attack an enemy, it looks at what was your last movement direction. If I attack left, it'll then go and draw a line in that direction, and with a specified angle, it'll look and see if specified angle here. It'll look and see if there's any enemies within that angle, and then from there it'll put them into a list, to an array, and it'll take that array and see who's the closest one in that array and assign the enemy for the auto locking. So it allows you just to keep attacking in direction without having to, hard lock onto an enemy and go in and do attacks. Makes it a little bit more smooth. The other thing I did is I added input buffering. So what happens now is, like, whenever you go to attack, there's a certain point, instead of what happened before is that the player would, whenever they go to attack, they would have the ability to like save attacks. So if they're in process of attacking and they attack the second time during that attack, it would kind of save that attack. But if you wanted to say dash after your first attack, you couldn't do that. It wouldn't check for if there was a dash that had been previously saved. It would just check for another attack or another dash or whatever kind of thing it was doing. But now it has a universal input buffering for single inputs. So now I can, even if I'm in the process of attacking, if I were to press dash in the middle of it, I get another one out. Right? Or same thing with dashing here. You'll see it happens at the end of it, and that's really prominent when you go in to do a launcher attack, right? So you're always going to want to like jump after a launcher, right? So you can go launch and then jump immediately afterward. You're not getting stuck on the other enemy there. So, all right, I'm gonna take here, look at the code. And to make the combat system feel good, which is majority of what I'm doing right now, is I added air attack gravity manipulation. So whenever you go to attack in the air, it will kind of like taper off your gravity scaling to I think it goes to completely nothing, and then from there it'll go and interpolate it back up to 1, I believe. I believe that's how I did it. I did this a while ago. Yeah. So you can input a custom gravity scale. So here it starts at 0.2. And whenever it checks to see if you're in the air, then checks to see if you're attacking. And if you are, it'll set the gravity scale to that. And then after you're done attacking, it'll go and reset the velocity back to 0 and then reset the gravity scale back to 1. So you'll start to experience normal gravity, which will then accelerate you back down to the ground. So it allows you to jump into the air and continue attacking something. You can see here the launching code here. So I have it set right now that it's a combat function input action. So what happens is that if you wanted to, right now this is just an example combat function, right? A launcher is something that's common in most games. So what I did here is, if you wanted to make this, the combat function, this button, something else, you would just, take this off and move it around. This whole launching thing operates entirely on its own. So you can just make this, grab another input action and just make this, combat function 2 or 4. Or you make it the primary attack if you wanted to. Just connect it to branch and it's all set. And you see here it has all the conditions just like normal attacking. When it gets over here, what it actually does, it checks to see if the player is in the air. This is a custom variable I did because I'm not liking how the system currently handles, or the project itself currently handles is falling. I think it does it too soon, so I have this custom time-dependent in-air check. So whenever a movement mode is changed, it'll check and see if it's falling, and if it's true, it'll run this in-air check, which is currently set to like half a second. So if they've been in the air for like 30 frames or half a second, it will set it to in the air, and then if they're not falling on the next check, it'll set it to false. And yeah, it'll do that in air check, and then if they're in the air, it'll give you the drop attack there, and if you're on the ground, it'll give you the launcher. The launcher it goes here to, it calls clamp enemy Z. Clamp enemy Z, whenever it hits the opponent and hits a player, it'll check me sure if, when it goes to launch something, it'll check me sure if this is true, and if it is true, it'll go into the enemy VP. And during hit stop will all run correctly, but then once it gets to here, it'll call stop launch clamp check, and it has this algorithm that'll basically compute the distance between the enemy and the player, subtract it from the jump height, and subtract it from the difference in the actor's current Z, and it'll set it as the maximum value, so the enemy won't ever be able to exceed that maximum distance. It'll just continue to clamp it for as long as that's happening. And then once they take damage again, it'll reset, it'll stop the launch clamp check. So if the next thing happens to be a launcher, it'll have launch clamp Z on it again, it'll run through the check again. But if it's something that, is like I don't know, some attack that launches them further into the air, if they want to break that clamp, if they're not calling clamp Z, it won't happen again. So that's how that happens. I think hit stop is also new. So whenever the enemy hits something, or gets hit by something, it stops their movement immediately. And it has some other checks here to see if they're falling. If they are, if they're not falling, it'll just play the hit animation. But if they are falling, it'll go through and it'll stop the clamp check and set the gravity scale to nothing. Set the yeah, that's the route. Set to nothing, and it'll set the play rate of the enemy hit stop. So if this is basically a custom hit stop thing, so I can go in and I can adjust how much hit stop I want, or how much hit stun I want. In this case, if they're in the air, it's the same. Let's see, I also added in taking damage is something I added in, but that's pretty simple. In the auto locking, so now with auto locking, and I added in an icon, so it tells you like who you're attacking, noted by some icon, and it'll close the gate and all that, and it'll manage it as an auto lock target, which is different from it being a standard lock target. What else here? Take a look at the input buffering, which I put all the way up here. So whenever something goes to, look at dash here, whenever it goes to, let's say you're going to dash, right? If you're, beforehand, if you weren't able to dash, like if you were attacking and you weren't able to cancel attack into a dash, this would just be false and it wouldn't go anything, it would just end. But now it saves the input. So when you go to saving the input, it'll go up to input buffering. And within input buffering, it will switch the attacks, go into an enum, and from the enum it'll go into and adjust whatever it's supposed to be set. So it sets, if you're attacking, it'll set save attack. If you're dodging, it'll set save dodge true. And on the next opportunity, it'll go in and perform that action, right? So they'll call execute saved action through an anim notify, and from there it'll check and be sure if you're able to do anything, which is currently the only thing right now that'll stop you from doing something is if you're above the maximum dodge number. And if you're able, there's another boolean here, if you're able to do something after maximum dashes, it'll allow you to go on, but if not, it'll just clear all the saved inputs in the queue and stop. So then I go into this hierarchy of moves to clear, have save launching, saving attacking, dodging, and jumping. If any one of those are true, it'll go and call execute on one of those, so we can call execute save attack here, and it'll just bring you through what was the old attack method, and once it gets through all the conditions there, it'll call attacking and it'll call that animation. And I think so the two big things are the input buffering and launchers. Yeah, and then most everything else I added some newer combat variables. I sorted it out. I removed there was a boolean before, it asked if you wanted to reset combo whenever you dash, but now it's just a number. So if you wanted to do it like Dynasty Warrior style, wherever you dash twice in a row, it'll remove your current combo counter. But if you just dash once, it won't remove it. So you can do, if you had a combo that's like light, light, heavy, you can do light, light, and then dash, and then do heavy, and it'll do the full combo, as opposed to resetting it. So now you can toggle that in if you want to. I also realized that the fault in just having having all the moves set up just be in default values. So I went in, because like if I updated the struct and I moved anything around, it would delete all my values. So that was not fun. I learned that the fun way. So now I go through and I define every move explicitly. So I have all these graphs, which is still nice. It's still easier than having to, because the way I have all the other templates set up, it's easier to just go in here, define these moves here, and then just have one function that runs through it. So that still is the preferred method of doing things. But yeah, that's the update. Because for the most part, those are the biggest changes. The rest of the changes are just some variable updates and changing how I do some things. I'll give you a look here at this is the biggest one that changes, the soft lock on, the auto lock. Whereas before it would run through, if you were hard lock on, this hasn't changed, but if you weren't locking on, it'll just call movement input direction, set the attack direction, and just do all this, stick the rotation, and be done with it. But now, like, all of this down here is new. It's just how I do that. So again, it would take the lock on radius, and it'll get everything in the lock on radius, because you're not going to be auto locking to anything that's outside that radius to begin with. And it'll get all the enemies in that range, and it'll loop through everything, and it'll check and see if you're in front or behind with the dot product. If you're behind, it adds it to, if you're behind, or if you're do line trace as well to see if you're in line of sight. If you're behind them or you're out of line of sight, it'll add it to an array to remove it later on. But if you pass both of those tests, if you're in front of and if you're within line of sight, it gets the distance from the enemy to the movement input direction line. So whenever you press like left, you'll draw a line there. You press left and attack, it'll draw a line and see the distance between every enemy within lock on range that is within line of sight and is in front of you. It gets a distance to that line, and then it'll just go through and say, all right, for every enemy, are you closer than this other enemy beforehand? And if you are, it'll go and it'll cast it and set it to closest enemy to line of sight. Which right now this currently doesn't do anything. I had planned to use it, but then I kind of just stopped using it, because what I did then is, after all this loop is completed, it'll come down here and see which one in this array. Well, first it removes every enemy in that enemies to remove array from the enemies in range, and then it'll check and be sure, all right, now which enemy is closest in this array. And then it has this, right now it's currently a magic number of like 800, of are you within an attack range of 800, which is kind of like, currently there are no attacks that are kind of outside of this range. It's kind of the sensical range I have right now, which I plan to change this or make this something that's unique to every move, but for right now I'm just going to leave it at 800 because it seems like a pretty good number. Checks to be sure if you're within that attack range, and if you are, then it sets that to the closest enemy to line of sight, and then sets enemy chosen to true. So then it'll come down here and check and be sure if the system itself chose an enemy. If it has, it will set it as the auto lock target. If it hasn't chosen an enemy, in this case it figures that there's nothing that's a better target than whatever the player was trying to attack, so it'll just give them their basic movement input direction as their attack direction, which is the kind of the default thing, and then set that and it goes out. But if not, it'll set the auto lock target, and then do the whole rotation thing, which is pretty standard. But yeah, that's how this turned out, which is, it's a lot of work, but it feels so much nicer, to the point now where I don't even really need to do hard lock on, which is great, because I'm gonna uproot that system, because I followed a tutorial for it, but I don't like the way they handled enemy cycling at all. I'm probably gonna pick it apart and use this system, the point distance from line, to start using the enemy toggling left and right, because if you look at it, it doesn't look, it skips enemies, never try to cycle between like left or right or up and down, and it doesn't work well, but I'll work on that a bit later. Yeah, that's how this turned out. This is going pretty smoothly. So right now I've got the attacks in, I've got the dashes in, I've got basic combat function. So I'm just going to go through and make everything just feel nicer. I'm going to work on attack feel next, and then yeah, that should actually take me a lot of time. Attack feel and then AI, I think, are the two big things I do then. So yeah, that's the update.